Okay, go ahead.
All right. So today's program, we are going to look at history of Europe, starting with Greek city-states, moving towards the Roman Empire, then the Middle Ages, and Renaissance, Protestant Reformation. Then, if we can reach it, then we will have a look at a video about the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution in England, colonialism, then modern history, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War period, and the start of the European Union.
It's great.
But Edu-san, I think that there's lack of the Crusader.
No, that's no. That's not. That's part of the Middle Ages.
Middle Age, okay.
Right. So actually, no, that plays a very important role. The Crusaders. So no. I haven't forgotten about the Crusaders.
Okay.
As a basis of the presentation, the starting point is this website. Doesn't open.
Oh, just keep it.
Right, here we go.
French Revolution.
Right. So looking at European history from the timeline, we going from left to right. The classical Greek period from 750 BC to 300 BC. The classical Rome period, 500 BC to 500 AD. So the thousand-year empire of Roman Empire, which is actually a reference to the Eastern Empire, not the entire Roman Empire.
Oh, this is the era of three kingdoms in China. 300 BC.
Right.
BCE.
Then the medieval Europe, 476 AD to 1200 AD. Then we from that we're going towards the modern European era until 1800.
So 1200 AD, at that time, many European people went to China, and they had lots of influence.
Right.
At that time.
Right. So this is and actually they also brought the Black Death with them from China.
Oh, really?
Right.
Black Death from China?
Right. It probably originated from China. Black Death was caused by rats, and actually fleas on rats, but those rats were not native to Europe.
Oh, really?
The rats probably originated from China. They got on board with ships that in the Black Sea, and when they brought the cargo from Black Sea to Italy, probably that's where it originated from. They carried the rats carried the fleas that caused Black Death in Europe and wiped out 1/3 of the European, at least 1/3 of the European population in a period of about 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that has actually to do with it, and the fact that they were in China has actually to do with the fact that they went on crusades and they realized that. So everything is connected. So let's get on with it. So first,
oh my God,
the classical Greek period. So the classical Greeks. What do we owe to the Greeks? So accomplishments, Athenian democracy. So I think you have been talking about that, right? Athenian democracy, the Olympics, the traditional, the original Olympics, philosophy, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, classical art, and theater, poetry. They were very rich culture, and last end of 300. That's actually stands for the militarism.
What is this?
It's actually a documentary, and it's about the Spartans. An army of 300 Spartans managed to keep they were vastly outnumbered by the Persians at the time. So the Greeks were constantly at war with the Persians, and the Spartans were a very famous and notorious group with a very strong military, a very strong army. They were fierce fighters, and they actually kept an army of thousands of Persians at bay with only 300 soldiers, apparently. Ultimately, they lost. And lost against the Persians, and Athens was burned by the Persians, today's Iranians. But that's where it stands for. Also science. So they came up with for example, the Greeks figured out what the size of the Earth was, and they came up with the concept of pi. So 3.14. That came from the Greeks, and the Greeks are also famous for Alexander the Great.
By the way, are you going to explain something like Athenian democracy? No?
About, sorry?
Athenian democracy.
Athenian democracy, not entirely, because I just stuck with the highlights, but if you want to discuss democracy and the way it works. Okay.
This is because just we discussed past several weeks, and Athenian Greece is future our examples. Because at that time citizens, they don't work.
Right.
So kind of their culture we need to study. Roman democracy.
Right. So basically it did work. So what did they do? Like they became thinkers. So they had slaves to work for them, right?
Yeah.
So they focused on philosophy, arts. They thought about, for example, how to organize the state. So politics. And science. So that those were all the results of how they had organized themselves.
I saw this before, okay, not now. Political theory and democracy, philosophy, art, theater, so on.
Right.
But this is only 5% of population.
Yeah, it's very, very small.
But not 95%. What they're doing at that time.
Right.
This is the point.
Just working.
No, they don't work. Okay.
I know. Slave is just working.
No, citizens. 95% of citizens, they don't work.
Yes.
Okay, what are they doing?
Are they doing?
Yeah, 5% is just knowledgeable people, wisdom people.
Right.
They are doing like this.
Right.
But 95 citizens, they don't need to work. What are they doing?
95%.
Yeah.
It's only 5% that was working.
Yeah, no. 5% is doing. No, I'm talking about citizens.
Right.
Not slavery.
Okay.
95 citizens, they don't doing any kind. They are not interested in democracy. They are not interested in political philosophy, art, anything else. But 95 people, what are they doing at that time? This is my concern. Like here, currently, they are AI advanced and their technology advanced. Many people don't need to work. But wisdom people, skilled people, they are looking for by themselves, study and they get knowledge, and they try to make an effort, and politics, whatever. But 95%, they are not interested in sort of things. But what they were doing at that time? This is my interest. Right? Like current Trump is supported by 35 people. The 35 people they are just blue workers, but actually they lost job. But in future, you don't need to work. Basic income, I'll give you money. But how they try to keep them happy? This is why several hundred years they are so happy eras they sustain. This is my concern.
Right. Well, I don't know whether everybody was happy. They were constantly fighting among each other. It was not really a...
No. Be careful. Fighting each other, just only political people. Okay? Political people kill each other, but ordinary people, they don't do anything at all. What they are doing at that time? Okay, this is my concern is democracy. Okay? Democracy is majority people. Majority people is not clever. They are sort of kind of stupid people, okay, and they are not intending to something. They're just interested in getting money and greedy, and they are just eating food and sleep, don't want to work. But how they try to keep them happy? This is my concern.
Well, I think that's where the arts come from, and that's where the
this is art?
Olympic Games come from. And
no, I tell you, theater, okay, once a week. Olympic Games once a year.
Right.
But how do they going to sustain their motivation? How do they try to them keep happy? This is my concern. Okay. How try to trust each other, even if they don't do anything at all. But like poetry or theater or some doing something, art and something. But this is very few people, right?
Doesn't involve the majority.
Majority people, what they're doing at that time for 100 years, they are trying to keep them happy. How they did it?
But I do believe that actually the people who did not have to work and engaged in these kinds of activities, they were a very small group within the Greek society.
No. 30,000 people is actually this kind of doing people or the 1,000, 2,000 people involved in politics, democracy, so on and so philosophy. But actually almost all 30,000 people, they don't do nothing at all. And how are they going to keep them happy for several hundred years? This is my interesting. And this kind of era will going to have experience in near future.
But they were not soldiers, they were not
no
engaged in, like for example, like Alexander the Great.
This is actually a few people going to join with him.
I think they are always chatting and discussion everywhere, anytime. Because currently European people said Greeks is a liar. liar.
This is actually part of me, but one thing is true, okay? They are chatting, discussing every day.
Right.
And several hundred years?
Philosophy. Oh no, they're also they built a huge empire that stretched from Greece, and they were constantly at war. First of all with the Persians, and then when the Persians were
oh, this is Alexander the Great.
This is Alexander the Great. No, okay.
Oh, so I tell you, only few people take out from this Greece. They just hire the soldiers on the way to the Iranian country.
A lot, and actually, if it were up to Alexander the Great, his empire would be bigger. But actually, his soldiers didn't want to go any further. They thought it was enough, and there was a lot of bickering going on at the time among the Greeks, because actually the Greeks were not the Greeks. The Greeks were the Macedonians, the Athenians, the Spartans. They were not united at all. So there were Macedonians who actually felt that Alexander the Great gave way too much tribute to the to for example the Persians, and he was much too lenient, and there were people in Athens who felt that they were not represented enough, and that the Macedonians got all the benefits. And then there were of course the people that were defeated by Alexander the Great, who actually rose up against him. So this was definitely not an empire that lasted. Like in the way that it was shaped here, that lasted very long, and it was very much divided here. It was not a very sustainable empire, at least not in this period of time. Later on,
but this here is more than 2,000 years ago,
right?
And they have very few information and very few network.
Right.
So Alexander the Great go outside, but Greece people, they don't know nothing at all, almost nothing at all, no newspaper. So for those Greece people, 30,000 people, what are they doing at that time? This is my concern. Right? Alexander the Great, they did a good job,
Right.
Moving toward to spread over Iranian countries, but actually ordinary people, they don't do nothing at all. So why these countries, they try to keep them face, keep them, not unless they keep them face, and they try to make harmonize, Why, how they're going to do that? This is my concern. How they're going to try to manage.
Keep them happy.
Yeah, ordinary people, keep them happy. This is my concern. This is a huge Japanese government need to concern. American government or European government need to concern for that. Greece is what their kind of system did they have.
Right. So I cannot really answer that question for the Greeks. Maybe I know a little bit more about how they did it in Roman times, but for the Greeks, I to be honest with you, I thought that only a very small number of people did not have to work, and that democracy and philosophy. Oh, I thought it was less than 30,000, but it was 30,000.
No, civilian people 30,000, and the same amount of slavery. So those people, they don't need to work, and I think I can't find out any article in Japanese. So English is a tremendous amount of document they have, but I can't pull on every kind of material. So this is my question. You are more easy to find out what they did doing before.
What was life like for an average citizen in Athens?
Right. Lot of material I found out, but I can't read it through. Lot of material, lot of videos I find out, but it's difficult to. They are not focused on those issues. Okay? They focus on philosophy, democracy, politics, art, or science. That's all. That's you said. But they never focus on ordinary people what they're doing. I don't know why, but this is my concern.
Well, it's actually that's generally true in history. Like if we look at history, then we look at wars, we look at special events.
Right, that's right.
But there's now like a new interest in history. For example, focusing on the role of women in society
exactly.
During
That's right.
the period prior to the war, etc. That's completely underlit. Or the people, the position of farmers in pre-industrialized Europe, for example, that kind of history, that there's not so much attention to it. We're always focusing on the wars, but I don't know exactly who said it, but it's a quote from somebody who said, well, actually, history is actually what we. Is that what is not, or happiness is that what we don't see in the history books? Actually, everything that happens what happens and what we see in the history books are the big events, but actually real life happens in that is not described within the history books.
I think that's one more point is Trump, he's focused on ordinary people. Poor people. That he got 35% support. He don't focus on current hot topics or wisdom people, intellectual people. He neglect everything. But he just only focus on ordinary people, not clever people. Okay. So that's the reason he's supported. I found it.
Yeah, that's very obvious. But it would be difficult for him to get the understanding of intellectual people because he's not an intellectual.
That's right. But his point is very hitting point. Okay, usually, like me, I try to focus on intellectual people. I try to focus is top knowledgeable people, but that is wrong. And majority of country people not like that. So Trump focus on those people, but at that ancient Greece is also they focus on ordinary people, politicians. So how they did it?
What did they do?
Yeah. So, but
but they didn't have to work the land. They didn't have to do anything.
No, nothing. I believe. Okay, maybe people is Plato's 5 stage, and finally they want to get knowledge and they want to read book, they want more skill. But ordinary people, no, they don't need anything at all. Like Trump, they don't want to read book. So majority people, they don't want to do nothing at all. But they usually people is frustrating. They critics complain, and even if they don't do nothing at all, and government pay money for them, but still it's frustrating. So how did they control for those people? This is our world future, near future. We need to more focus on.
No, what do you think, Uno-san? It's quite simple.
This is what I don't know, because beforehand I okay, and Plato's 5 stage, Plato, 5 stage, and final stage is we want to get knowledge, we want to get skill, right? But actually. No. Majority people, they don't want to study nothing at all. Okay, they don't do anything at all. And I thought, okay, get money, okay, and basic income. You don't need to worry. But then finally, you want to study. You want to get some social service skill or something additional value added for himself. No, they don't want to do that. But if leave it is, they're going society will get into unrest. But actually, those people, Greek people, is keep stable. And at that time, Spartan invaded them. And until that, they are very safe and stable country. They have no problem inside.
Right.
So this is my concern. How they're going to keep the people happy?
Well, I think one of already actually in what you're telling, I think there lies the answer, because it was not a big country. They were city-states, and they were not friendly towards each other. So there was a constant battle going on, and so basically they created a common enemy. I think that created unity, because for the Athenians, the Spartans were the enemy. So therefore, basically you needed to be part of the group, you needed to be part of that society, otherwise you were powerless against the Spartans. So I think that still is a strategy that's used by many politicians. You create a common enemy, like in Hungary, the current president Orban. He also creates a common enemy, like the immigrant, or in England, to get Brexit done. Also, they also created a common enemy towards the preservation of the British history. So that's basically how you can keep people at the same side. Just create a common enemy.
Did they?
Well, I can easily say that they were constantly at war, or either a tense relationship with their neighbors. So I can also easily say that you kind of, in that situation, in that political climate, you need to be part of some kind of a group. Otherwise, you're at risk.
This is maybe one reason they try to keep them alive.
It's not a big country. In Rome, in the Roman Empire, it was more a matter of divide and rule, create stakeholders, give people equal rights, and make everybody become part of the Roman Empire, no matter where you were born, and whether you were conquered or not. Basically, they made strategic alliances with local rulers and gave them a piece of the action, gave them some benefits to belong inside the Roman Empire, and actually gave them also equal education, same opportunities when it came to making career, etc. And that's how they managed to sustain Rome to some kind of extent.
Roman case is different from Greece.
It's different, yeah.
But based upon your opinion, Roman case is not. Okay, they are trying to battle expanding their country,
right,
territory, but Roman city people is very stable for several hundred years, right?
Right. Well, stable. Of course, they were challenged very often from all sides, from east, from the north, especially Western Roman Empire was under threat of invasion constantly, and there was always this kind of like centralization, decentralization effort to maintain stability. If things are stable and things are quiet, nobody wants to pay taxes because they don't feel threat. So they start to actually because the Roman Empire was huge, and it had many different people from many different backgrounds, and the distance from Rome is very far, and like you said, communication was not easy. So in that situation, if you are a local ruler and you need to pay taxes to Rome, then what do you get in return? In a military tight situation, so if you're under attack from a direct enemy, then you want to pay your taxes, because if you pay your taxes, you can get support from Rome if you need to fight the enemy. So in that situation, you can see that there was more allegiance towards Rome. But the moment things are peaceful and tranquil, and money is being earned, then people start to basically separate themselves from Rome. So you see a constant movement that's basically the wealthier the people are, the less allegiance they had to Rome, and vice versa. The more they're under threat, the more they pledge their allegiance to Rome, because they need the support of the entire Roman Empire. So it's kind of an organism where economics and military go hand in hand. But it is, I think, amazing that at a time like this, where indeed it would take weeks, if not months, to travel from the eastern side of the Greek Empire towards Athens, to actually have warfare and have decisions from all the way from Greece, and to maintain that. So that is also what basically led it to collapse. Because these.
You mean too much expanded?
So it was expanded. Like basically, what we see here is the empire of Alexander the Great, and he was a great military man, and he was very much respected. But when he died, after he died, actually he didn't leave. So what he did right is, for example, he did not humiliate the enemy. He tried to make them stakeholder into the Greek Empire after he defeated the Persians. But he also respected the Persians, and therefore he basically was able to build pretty good relationships here. But that went at the expense of the relationships with his own people, the Macedonians, who felt, okay, we are the winners here. We want to benefit more from our efforts, and we want to get more money out of this, out of our victory. But Alexander was very much against this. He wanted to expand his empire more. There were also people here who felt, well, we don't want to live under a Greek empire. We are the Persians. They have their pride. Basically, it was very much divided. But it was because of the person of Alexander the Great that he managed to do this, that he could keep the empire together. But after he died, there were no institutions, no political system, etc., that he had implemented that actually survived his legacy. So after he died, this empire fell apart very quickly. Mm. So this was a very strong military feat, but not exactly a very long-lasting empire. But nonetheless, I mean, the achievement was remarkable. Let's move on. So going back, moving from the Greek Empire towards the Roman Empire. So this is the classical Rome, the accomplishment, a republican government, a mighty army and a huge empire. So this stretches this circumferences the entire Mediterranean Sea, including the Black Sea, into the Caspian Sea in the northeastern part of the Roman Empire. So that is really a remarkable feat.
This is the before Christ, BCE.
This is the maximum size of the Roman Empire, I believe, is around 300. Around this map. When was it? I think that the peak of their reign was shortly after Christ. Mm. So it was probably at the height. When was it? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure when the absolute peak was. So they built a huge empire. Latin language is the basis of much of Europe languages today. It's still very much visible today. That it's the basis of all the different languages. It makes it much easier for people like us, like in the Netherlands, to learn English because we have the same foundation. The Roman system of law. And the Romans adopted Christianity, so that's the beginning of Christianity in Europe. Even though the Romans among the hardliners are a bit of believed to have killed Jesus Christ, but actually they are the ones who facilitated Christianity in Europe. So what we see here is an aqueduct, is a water bridge to bring fresh water into the cities. It was a huge accomplishment to actually allow for cities to grow. Like, to give you an example, at the peak of the Roman Empire, Rome had about 1 million citizens.
1 million citizens.
1 million citizens, and during the Middle Ages, Rome had only 30,000 citizens. The Middle Ages was called the Dark Ages. The literacy rate during the Roman era was much higher than in the Middle Ages. Basically, life during the Roman era was in many respects better than during the Middle Ages.
In that ages, Rome has the most large population.
Right.
Therefore, they have a big military power.
Right.
Therefore they could dominate around the Middle Sea.
No, actually, I think that what it was also a matter of diplomacy. Diplomacy.
Oh. What they could get a good diplomacy around.
Of course,
Greek.
Rome was strong. Rome had lots of money, but they basically they collaborated with the Greek. So we have the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, the Byzantium Empire, so the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, and basically what the Romans did was everybody could become a member of the Roman Empire. It didn't matter whether you're black or white or whatever ethnical background you had. Everybody could become a member and could get the same rights. Also, they made treaties with local rulers. So if you become a member of the Roman Empire, also you get like benefits from the Roman Empire. So by doing that, they actually they could stabilize themselves. So if local rulers could get more benefits than costs out of being a member, then actually they would pledge allegiance to Rome. When things turn bad, that changes, of course. That changes. So in time of prosperity, there was not so much fighting needed. It was just a matter of diplomacy and bringing more and more people into the Roman Empire. So it's not all brutal force. It's also politics. It's also a matter of politics. Yeah.
Very smart domination.
Right. It was a very smart domination. It was an inclusive domination. It was extending their influence throughout. And of course, I mean, there was also some brutal domination. Like, for example, this part is notorious here. The Vandals, currently like Tunisia and Algeria, they were notorious enemies of the Romans. But they were put down with brutal force. But a lot of other parts were more or less included, and otherwise they would not have been able to survive for so long. Economically speaking, this part was much more successful, the East Roman Empire, than the Western part. The Western part, therefore, also collapsed much quicker and went into the Middle Ages than the Eastern part. So they came under attack. People started to liberate themselves. The so-called barbarian Germans. They finally made the Western Roman Empire fail.
Where is the Eastern Roman Empire territory?
Sorry?
Where is the Eastern Roman Empire?
That's a good question.
Constantinople?
Constantinople was the capital.
Turkey?
Yes, Constantinople is Istanbul. Today's Istanbul, right? I have a map, actually. Oh, here it is. This is the Eastern Roman Empire. So basically, that includes Greek. So the Greek Empire, we talk about the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, but actually, the Greek Empire extended itself into the Roman Empire, and it was called the East Roman Empire. But that's a matter of branding it, because you could also argue that actually the Greek Empire was a continuation continued itself to the Roman Empire. It was an elite of a collaboration between the Greeks and the Romans.
Why they separated East and West?
Because the empire became too large. It could not be. So if for example, it was impossible to actually let's say that a war would start here in Egypt, then it would take weeks before that message would arrive into Rome. Therefore, it was not agile enough to respond quickly. Therefore, they decided they actually tried to divide it in four parts, but that didn't succeed. So they finally settled on dividing it in two parts.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the Greek Roman Empire, and this is the western part.
Mm.
So this the Greek Empire, the Byzantium Empire, and the Eastern Roman Empire. Very strong military discipline, engineering achievements, sewage, water management, like the Colosseum. 2 languages, Latin and the Greek language, and the adoption of Christianity. Relative stability, relaxed control. Well, it was not necessary to control it very strongly. And economic prosperity made the Roman Empire thrive. How?
No.
No, we're only going to look for another fragment. Oh, wait. Oh, no. Oh, I didn't put the time in. It was supposed to start somewhere here.
Europe, from its origins. Episode 1.
Oh, 1 second. I cannot see the
AD
preview.
312 to 390. I want to ask the question, where did Europe come from? Before Europe existed, there was Rome. The Hellenized Mediterranean basin was a single society and a single government, the Imperium Romanum, or Roman Empire, sharing 2 main languages, Latin in the west and Greek throughout the east, with its necklace of uniform cities dotted around the Mediterranean and its hinterlands, from Lisbon on the Atlantic to Palmyra in the Syrian desert. To the people living within it, Rome appeared as the world itself. The world of antiquity, the Roman Mediterranean, did not decline, and in the East it did not fall for 1,000 years after they said it did. In the West it is more accurate to say that as a culture and a political structure, it transitioned through a succession of states, responding to internal conflict and external shocks, until it no longer looked and behaved like the classical world. Our civilization is the outcome of the European Middle Ages. In order to understand our medieval background, we must begin by forming an image of the late Roman world that it directly emerged from. One of the chief characteristics of the Roman Mediterranean was its social, cultural, and political coherence, its uniformity, encapsulated within the term Imperium Romanum, the Roman Empire. The Imperium was a true state. That is, it had a single government authority that superseded all others. It had a capital city and a centrally commanded standing army. It had an educated public administration based on documents and on a written legal code. It had clear and demarcated frontiers, up to which the writ of the central authorities ran without dilution. It had a single currency, with the head of the emperor stamped on all the coins circulating within this huge space. And we all know that this state covered a huge area. By 40 BC, the Romans had brought political unity and internal security to the whole Mediterranean, justifiably naming it Mare Nostrum, our sea. Crucially for our story, for the future of Europe, Julius Caesar saw fit to press north away from the Mediterranean and to conquer what the Romans thought of as further Gaul, a landmass far distant from the great watering hole of the ancient culture. the area that would one day become central and northern France. This conquest established the frontier of the Mediterranean world on the left bank of the river Rhine. The civilizational weight of Gaul, though, always remained in the Romanized south. Further campaigns brought present-day Switzerland, Bavaria, Austria, and parts of Hungary into the Roman world, establishing its northern frontier along the south bank of the river Danube, from the Alps to where it flows into the Black Sea. Long before, the city of Rome had destroyed its most dangerous rival, Carthage, and made North Africa too an extension of its own culture and way of life. Where the waters of the Danube and Rhine formed the northern, what we call the European, limits of the Mediterranean world, in the south that limit was set by the sands of the Sahara. Overwhelming military might is enough to conquer such an empire, but to keep it over many centuries, the tramp of legionary leather is not enough. To sustain a long-term polity, a political compromise must exist between the rulers and the ruled. The leading families among the conquered peoples must be given incentives to sustain the empire, to become stakeholders in the Roman project. They must accordingly, and as a condition, themselves become assimilated to Roman culture, to become, with the succession of generations, indistinguishable from their one-time conquerors. A crucial practice of the Romans, then, was to co-opt, after a decent interval, the elites of the peoples they conquered into their own high society. Here is the Emperor Claudius, arguing for the admission of the sons of prominent Gallic families into the Roman Senate. Quote, "All these young men of rank, on whom I cast my glance, you surely do not regret seeing among the numbers of the senators. Even the territory which is located beyond the province of Gallia Narbonensis, in the south of France, has it not already sent you senators? For surely we have no regrets of going clear up to Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, for members of our order." End quote. This process of co-option created a single ruling class, a network of prominent families sharing an identical education and culture, speaking either Latin in the west or Greek in the east, and dominating the surrounding rustici of the countryside from the opulent and similar-looking cities that ringed the Mediterranean. By the end of the 300s, these elites had, through the pull of Latin and the integrative effects of service in the regions, brought about the extinction of the Celtic and Iberic languages in Spain and Gaul.
So, what they did to maintain so basically the Roman Empire, through military intervention, they would conquer. Then they would allow some time, and then they would actually try to bring stability and expand the empire by bringing allegiances. So once the animosity has evaded, has evaporated, they started to bring them in by giving them the same position, become members of the Senate. People from France, the Galliers, they were invited to have representatives in the Roman Senate. So they became really full members, and those members, given these opportunities, they were more inclined towards working together with Rome instead of against it, because they were actually full members and could benefit from their allegiance to Rome. So how come such a huge empire could sustain for so long? By actually creating equal opportunities for all the citizens of the Roman Empire.
Which city is that the former one?
The former one?
Yeah. Which city is this?
I don't know.
For members of our...
this is Lyon.
Lyon.
Right. This is located in the southeastern part of France. beautiful city.
It's very ironical event. Democratic country, Rome,
Right.
finally choose authoritarian country as a empire system.
Mm.
It's very ironical. Democrat make a
Authoritarian
country. It's very ironical.
Well,
To keep the big big countries,
right,
to dominate the big country areas.
right.
To dominate the big areas needs a authoritarian system.
Right. In order to, well, the big question is, of course, how can you make democracy work? Like really, if you need to ask that communication-wise, it's almost impossible. Because how can you have debate and have people weighing in and giving their opinion if they are thousands of kilometers apart? That doesn't really contribute to communicating together, to exchanging ideas, etc. It's basically impossible. I don't think that I don't see how democracy could work if you have if you don't have any means of communication. Because they said that there was no way to communicate. So I think maybe within a city, democracy could work, like in Athens, and maybe within Rome, but based on that, the entire empire needed to be ruled.
Rome is shifting from democracy to authoritarian.
Yes.
Like a Trump.
Like Trump.
Huh?
In the face of adversity comes humanity. Okay, so I'm not gonna watch the entire video. I think that the point that I wanted to make here is how could such a large empire sustain itself for 1,000 years by being inclusive, by assimilating different cultures into a single
assimilation.
Empire. Yeah, assimilation.
Like France.
Like France.
Yeah, France assimilation.
Right.
Not invasion.
Right.
But they did a big problem for Libya.
France.
But they did the same thing, and at that time, France invading Libya in 1950, 60s. Right?
Libya or Algeria?
Algeria.
Yeah.
France, they did. But usually France assimilation in Africa.
Well, basically, because actually I think they underestimated the French in Algeria. They considered, I think they truly considered Algeria to be part of France, and there were about 1 million French people.
Oh yeah, that's right,
in Algeria.
part of France.
But the Algerians didn't think so. They wanted to become independent, like the rest of the world. So the French thought Algeria to be part of France, but the Algerians did have no interest to be part of France. So they revolted against the French. But that kind of assimilation strategy worked quite well in Indochina, for example. They managed to control entire Indochina, which stretches almost the entire Southeast Asian region, with only 30,000 French people there. So that was impossible to have an army if there would be a constant rebellion against the French. Then 30,000 would not be enough to manage such a large area. But actually they could, by assimilation, by working together, by forming strategic alliances, making also.
I forget Indochina. Why they failed to occupy Indochina by France?
France actually they did occupy Indochina.
Yeah, and finally they failed in 1957.
Yeah.
In Before.
Yeah, they also they wanted to become independent.
Oh, okay. Becoming independent.
Right. So there were independent movements, of course, like everywhere else in the world. Then during World War II, Japan was on the side of the independence movement. But after the war ended, France tried to regain control of Indochina, but then they never actually succeeded in really bringing Indochina back under control. So
you have good memory. I am very poor for that kind of memory. Okay. Move.
All right. So it was too large to defend the Roman Empire. That's why it was split into an Eastern and a Western empire. And the Eastern Empire was actually more affluent.
By the way, my simple question is: Roman Empire are those people, not the Italian people?
No, well, basically the origin. No, well, Italy is basically a concept that was created after the Roman Empire.
What kind of people are they?
The Romans. Well, the origin of Rome is the city of Rome, and which is basically a city-state.
Italy?
Italy was formed later.
No, Italian?
The Romans?
Yeah.
Whether they are Italians?
Yeah.
Well, today's Italians, but basically they are really the Romans. Italy was formed maybe 200 years ago.
Yeah, I know, but living citizen of Rome is Italian, right?
Right,
Same people?
But not only Italians, because they would also have people from all over the region who they dominated, who also come to Rome, became member of the Senate, and
my question is same people or different people?
Same people as who?
It's Rome.
So that's what I'm saying.
2,000 years ago, now is the same
Right.
people living there? Different people.
Oh.
My question is, question is, okay, Italian people is kind of easygoing people, right? It's the same?
If they had the same culture.
Yeah.
Basically, Rome was nearly vanished. So it went from a population of 1 million to a population of 20,000-30,000 during the Middle Ages. So it became a very small rural area. Actually, a lot of cities disappeared and became really an agricultural society during the Middle Ages. So I don't know if we can say that the people that we see today in Italy are the same as the Romans as we see today. Whether they had the same culture, I doubt it.
Yeah, looks like. This is my question.
That probably evolved. So the Eastern Empire was more affluent, which led to internal tensions that made the empire vulnerable from for outside attacks, like the barbarians in the north, the Germans. Weakness led to outside attacks. Money to mobilize an army was necessary. This made it necessary to raise taxes, and this led to local opposition and tax evasion.
Local means outside Rome.
Outside Rome, right. But these were entire countries, right? So these countries, when they were forced to pay higher taxes, they would revolt against it. And this led to internal struggles. So that there was basically...
it means their territory getting so huge. It means that they cannot handle by themselves.
Exactly. And there was not so much, not always so much... loyalty within the empire. So if, for example, there was an attack from the east, the western part of the empire would not be exactly enthusiastic to help the eastern part of the empire to defend the eastern part. So to be loyal to their brothers in the east, and vice versa.
why Eastern Empire continues more than 1,000 years
because
rather
actually
than Western Empire?
because they were more stable and they were more economically affluent.
Okay.
They were just more successful.
Okay.
So basically, the economic problems led to the fall of the Western Empire, while the Eastern Empire continued until 1453, when the Ottomans took control of the region.
Okay.
So this is the another important thing to remember and that this is actually the history of the world mainly. But if we look at this map, this is a map of the beginning of the Middle Ages. We look at the position of these different peoples here. Like for example, if we look at the Franks. They were located here. Now, Franks were the people who later became Francs. So the Franks moved here. If we look at, let's take another example. The Lombards, they're here, but later they got their power over here. The Angles and the Saxons, they're here in northern Germany and Denmark, but they came to dominate the UK, England. So we see that basically the Europeans were in constant movement. People were moving north, south. They were at war, and they were changing their positions constantly. So this whole the Germans here, for example, Germany, basically, where the Saxons and Angles left to England, the Germans actually moved westward to control this area that we now know as Germany. So Europe, historically speaking, has had many different peoples, and they also were constantly on the move. So the Western Roman Empire fell, and that led to the period which is called the Middle Ages. There are the early Middle Ages, the High Middle Ages, and the Late Middle Ages. The early Middle Ages was characterized by a decline in population, a counter-urbanization, which I already mentioned, is basically that the cities were disappearing, people were moving away from the cities, and it became a agricultural society, movement of people, and very strong domination of the Catholic Church. Basically, the Roman Empire was replaced, the power of the Roman Empire was replaced by the power of the Church. They were the main
Church gets power.
Right. So this is a period of relative poverty, but actually that starts to change. In the High Middle Ages, that starts around the year 1000, the population started to grow. One reason is technological progress. So people were, for example, growing crops, which is very labor intensive, and they started to raise cattle, which actually brought and they also introduced like agricultural technology, like plows and things like that. Another factor was that actually the climate was warming up around the year 1000. Basically, it was getting a little bit warmer in Europe, and this led to an increase in crop yields. In that time, they had a system of manors that was basically that led.
What is manor?
Manor is a village where the farmers live. So basically, farmers, people who they're not really the owners of the farm. They are people who work on the farms and to provide their services, their labor on the farmland.
Fief.
I don't know what that is.
Fief.
Thief?
Fief.
What's that?
Fief.
I don't know what it is.
Fief.
Thief?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
This is the fief means this eras, this is fee.
Thief. Ah! Yep. Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. Yeah. Stockloaners, yeah. So basically, they rent themselves out. They don't own the farmland, but they work on the farmland around them. And feudalism, that's the political structure whereby knights and lower status nobles owed military service to their overlords in return of the right to rent lands from and rent manors. So basically, that's the system. Also known in Japan, right? You also had a feudal system with a military class, and to protect the farmers, and the farmers were to contribute and pay for military service to keep them safe from attacks from overseas, from intruders. Intellectual life was marked by scholasticism. Philosophy that emphasized joining faith to reason.
What was scholasticism?
Basically, it's a it is a how scholastic. Yeah. So faith is in itself is something not very rational, right? It's a more or less a conviction. It's a
song.
song.
そう何今学校中だけど。ああ、わかりました。はい。ありがとう。はい。今日、孫君来たくない。
来たくない。なるほど。Okay. So basically, it tries to connect faith with science. So it tries to find a balance between science, and faith. So God needs to maintain a scientific. So it doesn't challenge religion.
Okay. Skepticism, that is every everything is made by the fire, water, and something.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically everything still allows for a central position of God, even though we cannot scientifically prove that there is a God. God is the start and the end of everything, and they try to rationalize that with science. So it's kind of puts a brake on the actual scientific
that's
approach.
Origin. That thinking is the origin of the atom. Is it?
The origin of the atom. I don't know what.
Atom. Genshi.
Right. The origin of atom. Oh, I don't know. Can you explain that?
Scholasticism is the origin of the idea of the atom.
Oh, really? I don't.
Everything is made by the several things.
Right. No. What I mean with scholasticism is that basically it is a scientific approach that puts a central role for that doesn't question the role of God in everything.
Oh.
So you cannot, like for example, I believe that there were scientists, like for example, who was that?
Ask Google.
All right.
Scholar is the original school.
哲学神学を作らなくていい。これ簡単にサムライズ言う。サムライズ。not simple.
Western Europe.
Mythology. Mythology.
Mythology.
Mythology.
So it could never be questioned.
That is not depend on the God.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mythology. Okay. Let's go. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So we see that we see that actually the people get more affluent in the high Middle Ages. Then in the late Middle Ages, there is actually a decline. Difficulties, including calamities, including famine, plague, and war. The plague plays in it.
When? That time. When? Later.
So the latter half. So, for example, the plague, which was the latter Middle Ages, that's around 1350. That's the plague, and later
just before
title
Enlightenment age.
Right, just before the Enlightenment. So the basically what happened here is the Black Death. So this is an explanation of the Black Death.
If you write anything on your computer,
again.
You need to get Grammarly.
I write pretty much all day, every day.
Ted.
Imagine if half the people in your neighborhood, your city, or even your whole country were wiped out. It might sound like something out of an apocalyptic horror film, but it actually happened in the 14th century during a disease outbreak known as the Black Death. Spreading from China through Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, the devastating epidemic destroyed as much as 1/5 of the world's population, killing nearly 50% of Europeans in just 4 years. One of the most fascinating and puzzling things about the Black Death is that the illness itself was not a new phenomenon, but one that has affected humans for centuries. DNA analysis of bone and tooth samples from this period, as well as an earlier epidemic known as the Plague of Justinian in 541 CE, has revealed that both were caused by Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium that causes bubonic plague today. What this means is that the same disease caused by the same pathogen can behave and spread very differently throughout history. Even before the use of antibiotics, the deadliest outbreaks in modern times, such as the ones that occurred in early 20th century India, killed no more than 3% of the population. Modern instances of plague also tend to remain localized or travel slowly, as they are spread by rodent fleas. But the medieval Black Death, which spread like wildfire, was most likely communicated directly from one person to another, and because genetic comparisons of ancient and modern strains of Yersinia pestis have not revealed any significantly functional genetic differences, the key to why the earlier outbreak was so much deadlier must lie not in the parasite, but the host. For about 300 years during the High Middle Ages, a warmer climate and agricultural improvements had led to explosive population growth throughout Europe. But with so many new mouths to feed, the end of this warm period spelled disaster. High fertility rates combined with reduced harvests meant the land could no longer support its population, while the abundant supply of labor kept wages low. As a result, most Europeans in the early 14th century experienced a steady decline in living standards, marked by famine, poverty, and poor health, leaving them vulnerable to infection. And indeed, the skeletal remains of Black Death victims found in London show telltale signs of malnutrition and prior illness. The destruction caused by the Black Death changed humanity in two important ways. On a societal level, the rapid loss of population led to important changes in Europe's economic conditions. With more food to go around, as well as more land and better pay for the surviving farmers and workers, people began to eat better and live longer, as studies of London cemeteries have shown.
Many people
Higher
did,
living
huh?
standards also brought an increase in social mobility, weakening feudalism, and eventually leading to political reforms. But the plague also had an important biological impact. The sudden death of so many of the most frail and vulnerable people left behind a population with a significantly different gene pool, including genes that may have helped survivors resist the disease. And because such mutations often confer immunities to multiple pathogens that work in similar ways, research to discover the genetic consequences of the Black Death has the potential to be hugely beneficial. Today, the threat of an epidemic on the scale of the Black Death has been largely eliminated thanks to antibiotics. But the bubonic plague continues to kill a few thousand people worldwide every year, and the recent emergence of a drug-resistant strain threatens the return of darker times. Learning more about the causes and effects of the Black Death is important, not just for understanding how our world has been shaped by the past. It may also help save us from a similar nightmare in the future.
So human beings get stronger to avoid this disease.
Right. Right. So actually, it killed 1/3 of the world population and half of the people in Europe was killed in a period of only 3 years time.
You said also.
No, that's the 1/3 of the entire world population. Entire world population. So then the question was actually at the time also like, okay, why did this happen? So who did they blame for what did they blame? What did they attribute this Black Death for?
You told
Rats, but people then thought maybe astrology, the stars, could be the reason for that, or it could also be. It was also attributed to earthquakes. Another theory was that it was a punishment by God. Basically, God sent Black Death to people to punish them for their sins. Another theory was that actually the Jews were responsible for it. Jews were responsible for it. They were suspected of actually poisoning the wells in the cities. And why was that? Actually, the reason was that much fewer Jews died of the Black Death than other people. The reason for that was that actually Jewish people lived more or less in seclusion inside these societies. And they had different attitudes toward hygiene than the Europeans at the time. So they were much more hygienic. Therefore, they were less susceptible to actually contract the Black Death. And so it was actually considered. So the people in, for example, I believe it was a German town. They killed about 3,000 Jewish people, because they suspected them to pollute the wells that caused Black Death, but it was actually a different attitude towards hygiene that made them not die of Black Death. So that's also how we can trace back the role of anti-Semitism in Europe. That dates back all the way to the period of the Middle Ages. So this Black Death, the result of the Black Death, led to a labor shortage. Like all of a sudden, like 50% of the European population was wiped out. With the same amount of land, this led to labor shortage, and it also led to protectionism because people were very much at risk. So they needed to defend their food supplies. That prevented people from trading. So people were all sitting on their own food supplies. That prevented them from trading, which led to wars. It was us versus them, and this actually led to malnutrition.
What the labor shortage? What does this mean? Labor shortage.
Labor shortage. Basically, there were not enough people because so many people died. There were no people to work on the lands anymore.
Okay.
And as a result, this led to protectionism, which led to warfare, malnutrition, poverty, diseases and hunger, inflation. It was a spiral, which happened in Europe. And actually, what we saw is that farmlands, because there were no people who could work on them, they changed back to forests. So it was a reforestation. So the Middle Ages was really a period of decline and retreat compared to the times when the Romans ruled Europe. On the other hand, the people who did survive, we already saw that in the video. The people who did survive, they had more resistance against the plague, and because there was a labor shortage, there was wage increases. These manors, the people who worked for a fee on the lands, they were demanding higher wages. The landlords tried to counter it. And there were actually some parts in Europe where they actually, if people refused to work, they could put them in jail. But most landlords were depending on the laborers, on the manors, and this led to wage increases. And actually, the workers demanded more rights, and that actually stopped feudalism in Western society.
Why stop feudalism?
Stop feudalism because it was impossible to. Feudalism could only exist because there was a very asymmetrical power balance between the landowners and the workers. But because the workers became scarce, they got more powerful, and they no longer accepted the situation where the landowners could decide everything. So that's basically the result.
Devastating.
Yeah, this for them it was the end of their
devastating land.
Devastating.
Oh, land. Nobody plowed.
Right. So nobody worked on the lands, and some lands got they were no longer in use, and they returned to become forests, like they've been before. Mm-hmm. Another result of the Black Death was that many people felt like the church could not protect us. Not only did they not protect us, but the clergymen, the people, the priests, they also died just like anybody else. And people would think, hey, what's that? I mean, we are so much dominated by the church, but if the church cannot protect us and cannot even protect themselves, what is the church actually? So people started to doubt the significance of the church, and this actually led to a significant loss of the Catholic Church, and that actually started the Reformation movement. The Protestant church with Calvin and Luther.
It's very interesting. Church was poor. That makes us religion reformation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the Catholic Church was as a lot of people started to ask, why could this happen? And the Catholic Church was maybe not the right church. People still felt, okay, there needs to be an explanation for everything, but the Catholic Church in itself was ready to be challenged, and a lot of people felt like the Catholic Church is not the right church, and
so this Reformation impact China for Confucianism. And at this rise of Reformation, and they changed back to the basic, back to the old material.
Right.
And this case is feudalism finish. At that time, their religion reformation means back to the Bible instead of church. So
Right.
this is the same impact to China. China, okay, now we're going to focus on old analects, old books, instead of the current commentary.
Not the institutes, but
Right,
the go back to the source.
That's right.
Right. So the Catholic Church has always been very good to themselves. They became a political factor. It's like a political movement. They became they got power, but it was all based on the Bible. But was there still a connection between the Bible and the Church? And many people thought it was not. Therefore, they were looking for a way back to the origin of what actually gave the Catholic Church power, which was the Bible. So we see that the Protestantism, which was the result of the Reformation, is actually a much more sober church than the Catholic Church. In the Catholic Church, there is a lot of art and wealth, and the Catholic Church is very rich. The Protestant Church is much more sober. People live a more sober life.
By the way, Protestant is which area?
It's Germany, Denmark,
Netherlands.
Netherlands is
Where is the Catholic?
Catholic is actually south of the Rhine River.
No, one river.
Right, south of the Rhine River is
So
Catholic.
you said the Catholic is rich?
The Catholic Church is very rich church with lots of art and they have a savoir vivre, they call it in France. Is that they know how to live and enjoy life and indulge themselves in good food.
Poor.
It's not necessarily poor. But for example, in the 17th century, the Netherlands began to dominate the world, and they were Protestants, but they didn't lead an extravagant life. They got very rich, but officially they were not spending it, and because a frugal life,
simple life.
Simple life. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Oh, actually, I didn't discuss the.
What's the difference?
Right. Actually, I did. I completely missed the. That's strange. I missed the. I didn't put that in. Oh, sorry about that. Let's go back to.
What did you miss?
Medieval era. The Crusades.
Oh, Crusade.
Right.
You have Crusade? Material.
So Europe going in the period of decline of learning, decline of trades because of basically people start to isolate themselves. Cities are dwindling, and Europe suffers from a wave of invasions because of the weaker positions. The Muslims from here, from the southeast. Vikings from the north, Magyars with the current Hungary.
What is Magyars?
Magyars are people.
Oh,
Hungary, yes, and the Mongols. So Europe comes under attack, and the churches become the most powerful political source in Europe. Yes, this is the crusade.
Current Europe has one country, Romania.
Right.
They are children of the Roman Empire. Romania is a from
right.
Is that really?
I think actually their origins are Slavic. Slavic.
But the country name is
Romania. Oh, it's possible, but it's made.
No, Romania. The origin is not Romania. The origin is Roma.
Roma people.
Roma people.
Right.
Different from Roma.
Roma is a people. It's a
Roma
folk,
is kind of Jewish.
Oh.
They don't place for staying. They are just moving around. This is Roma.
Oh, thank you.
Right. So in the High Middle Ages, the church becomes very more powerful, and they want to start a crusade to liberate Jerusalem, which is the Holy Land. The Holy Land is occupied by the Muslims, and it's for the landowners under the feudal system. They want to liberate the Holy Land and make it Christian, so they start these crusades and send knights and soldiers to the Middle East, and actually they got a big ass whipping. They were not very successful. These crusades, military speaking, they were inferior to the Muslims. And actually, this part was much wealthier than the Western European part. So but as a result, they actually got more ideas about, hey, actually, there's maybe we cannot beat them military speaking, but it gave them ideas to start trade with them. So that trade actually led them to the Silk Route, which led them to China, where they actually brought rats back to Europe, and that introduced the plagues.
Why they decided to start crusade?
That was because Jerusalem was occupied by the Muslims, and this is the Holy Land. This is the birth place of Jesus Christ. That it's supposed to be a Christian territory, right? So we're now going to the Renaissance, the 1300s to the 1600s. It's the rebirth of learning and arts after the Dark Ages, where actually like literacy was much lower during the Dark Ages, during the Middle Ages, than it was during the Roman Empire. But this is a restoration of learning and arts. Famous people in this period like Leonardo da Vinci, Donatello, Michelangelo, the sculptor, and there was a deep thirst for knowledge, and the Renaissance puts reason first, empirical wisdom. Looking at the Christian history, we have the Reformation. This is okay. So let's go here. The Reformation is in the 1500s. That's after the plague, and it's led by Martin Luther, and it's a religious reform movement back to the origins, back to the Bible, away from the institutions, back to God, really. There's the church is everywhere is being challenged, the Catholic Church, not only by Luther, Calvin, but also Henry VIII, who introduced the Church of England, because he cannot divorce from his wife, and leads to a breakaway from the Catholic Church, and Christianity is splintered and will never be a truly united religion anymore. Let's not go there. This is the exploration. This is so during the Renaissance period, science actually it's rationality, but it is also an attempt to come closer to God. To understand the nature is to be seen as a way to get closer to God, because God is the creator of nature. So science equals a search for God, a search for the truth, which is seen as a divine practice. So it's not a break away from rationality. Basically, what scientists aim to look for is to find God. Very big progress made in astronomy, physics, medicine, break away from the Catholic Church, and exploration.
I don't know, come too closer to God. What do you mean?
Come closer to God. So God is seen as the creator, as the source of everything. The way that the world functions is all the work from God. So scientists are not breaking away from God. Actually, they are looking for God through science. By understanding the way things work, they get closer to God. That's the objective. And then the period of exploration starts. For example, exploration to the Americas in
Vasco da Gama.
Vasco da Gama, and they bring new plants to Europe and new animals. But they also, when they go outside, for example, to the United States, their disease kills many of the natives. Like 90% of the Native Americans are being killed by diseases brought by the Europeans into North and South America. So if you look at current South America, for example, there are not so many native people left. Most of them are either black, former slaves who were brought there through the slave trades, or have European origins. And that's basically not because it was designed to be like this by humans, but it's a matter of the disease that kills so many local people. And then the theory of the period of enlightenment as true rationalism, reason. This is where a lot of fundamental ideas are being introduced into European society that still very much determine how we are thinking today. One of those theories is John Locke's theory of the mind, the origin of modern conceptions of identity and self. Define the self through continuity of consciousness. He postulated that at birth the mind was a blank slate, or a tabula rasa. He maintained that we are born without innate ideas.
Tabula rasa, what is it?
It's a blank slate.
Blank slate.
Blank slate. So it's a basically at birth you are like a whiteboard without anything written on it. So basically, you're clean, you're clear, you're unspoiled. And that knowledge is instead determined only by the experience derived from sense perception, so empiricism. Something must be capable of being tested, repeated, and nothing is exempt from being disproven. So basically, he says, we are a blank slate, and everything we need to question. It's the basis, the foundation of science. Everything that we see is true until disproven. So John Locke basically introduces the scientific method with his theory.
I don't understand exactly.
So basically, everything is true until proven different.
No, explain a little bit about blank slate. What is it?
Blank slate is that we are
empty mind.
Yeah, empty. Yeah.
What mean empty mind?
Empty mind? No, a blank slate. So basically, everybody is formed by his experiences.
Right? Formed
by his experience. So when you come on
determined only by experience.
Right. 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 So everybody is born with as a clean slate, as an unwritten piece of paper, blank sheet of paper, and the paper is filled with experiences, and the experiences determine how we see truth. And truth is being determined by what we experience, and and based on that, we need to look for experiences to see what is true and what is not true. Voltaire comes with the concept of the freedom of religion. It is perfectly evident to my mind that there exists a necessary internal, supreme and intelligent being. This is no matter of faith, but of reason. But it doesn't adhere to an institute, right? So there is a God, that is I'm sure of, but there is so in the Catholic Church, we pledge allegiance to the Holy Catholic Church. That's the only church, right? But what Voltaire is saying here is, oh, there is a God, but what he's also saying is that God is not tied into a certain church. So we can adhere to a church, but basically what he's
free from church.
Free from the church. And another important figure in the Enlightenment period is Montesquieu, who is the founder of the Trias Politica, which is basically is the way that we currently organize our countries, through a separation of legislation, the executive order, and the judicial power. So legislation
this is current democracy.
Parliamentary democracy. Exactly. So that comes from Montesquieu. He's the founder of those ideas.
Well, he's the first person to speak out this kind of different, independent organization. Okay.
Exactly. So that is those are very important figures, and based on their shoulders, a lot of other important figures are there, but they form the foundation of rationalism, empiricism, freedom of religion, and the way that we organize our countries. Okay, and then we enter the Industrial Revolution, and that is something that I would like to skip for today.
Finish today.
Right.
This is just we started from here, last IT revolution.
Right. Right, but this is a very interesting, but it's kind of long. Okay, why did the first industrial revolution start in the UK? That was the central question, and it's a documentary from the BBC. It's actually interesting to watch, but it's almost an hour.
Yeah, steam engine. Okay, thank you very much for today.
All
right. Next week you skip, and 2 weeks later you're going to consider for my book. And,
right.
Based on my book, you're going to propose your thought.
Okay, so I did not actually get into the modern industrial area and the World War II and modern history.
Okay,
but it's okay. I mean, we can skip everything, and I can try to introduce these things into my.
No, you can do it if you want, and up to you. You just think continuation of I recommend for my book and they're going to start with Japanese culture and European culture.
I'm also looking at Kimoto-san because actually you were very interested in like colonialism and how to maintain. So I'm not really sure which way to go here. Maybe I should actually continue with history.